Chapter 562. Luonan walked out from the lounge and immediately furrowed his brows. This was because Jianghu was smiling at him from outside the lounge. There was even a camera hovering on her shoulder. On the other side of the camera was the powerful attention of over 30,000 ability users from every region of the world. Xuanhuan, who had followed Luonan out the door, took a step forward when she saw this. She requested Jianghu to step back. Please don't disturb the lecture. As a veteran anchor, Jianghu obviously wouldn't be like those stupid newbies who would cry and forcefully point the camera at Luonan's face. Even if she wanted to retort, Xuanhuan, a B-rank power, could kill her in an instant at any time. Jianghu stepped back in a practiced manner. She had a radiant smile on her face. It was as if she was talking to an old friend. She said to Luonan, "Do you want to guess the number of people in the live broadcast?" Xuanhuan didn't know about this joke, but Luonan understood. He gave her a glance and responded, "Around 34,000. Bingo. This was both praise for Luonan's judgment and encouragement for himself. Jianghu didn't ask Luonan how he guessed it. It didn't matter if it was his extraordinary strength or if he was secretly paying attention to the live broadcast. In any case, she had already struck up a conversation with Luonan. She had to seize the opportunity. It took only 2 steps to walk from the lounge to the podium. Jianghu felt that she had already retreated to the podium. In fact, the majority of her body had already appeared on the podium. The attendees, who had just sent her off with their gazes, let out low roars of laughter. But then Luonan's figure reappeared on the inner edge of the podium. The 1,000 or so ability users in the circular conference room completed the complete transformation from clamoring and buzzing to absolute silence in the short span of 3 seconds. Jianghu could feel this change extremely clearly from the podium. Over 1,000 pairs of eyes pointed straight at her. Even if they weren't directed at her, even if she had experienced countless major scenes, she still felt a pressure like a dagger pressing down on her back in an instant. Jianghu adjusted her breathing and seized the time to speak the real question. She didn't pursue any depth. She just wanted an exclusive influence. Before this lecture, did you imagine the impact it would bring? What sort of self-evaluation did you have of the previous lecture? The moment the question left her mouth, Jianghu suddenly discovered that she had unknowingly given Luonan a title of respect. Was it the bad habit of interviewing too many extraordinaries? Or was it the shock brought about by the previous lesson? Luonan did not know of the subtle emotions in Jianghu's heart. He stood at the entrance to the stage, unable to see the entire situation within the conference room. But on the mental plane that could be explored, the gorgeous and orderly maelstrom manifested the deep trend of collective consciousness formed by over 1,000 people. Luonan was a lecturer who had just stepped onto the stage for the first time. Being able to accomplish this in a little over an hour was enough for him to be proud of himself. But the obsessive-compulsive soul buried in the bottom of his heart came out at this moment. In his opinion, regardless of whether it was the atmosphere in the circular conference room or the reaction on the spiritual level, it was neat and tidy, but it still lacked a meaningful structural trend. This was like a teacher who had the ability to make his students listen attentively to his lessons, but did not give his students enough knowledge in class. It was a lively talk, but it was worthless. Of course, the cage theory was valuable, but most people in the venue did not know where its value lay and how it should be used and implemented. This was the next mission Luonan needed to complete. So he ignored the first of the 2 questions. He only answered the second one. Lessons never only talk about true and wrong questions. The process and the result are equally important. Perhaps even more important than the result. You mean? Jianghu finally experienced Luonan's ability to jump in thought. She was stupefied for a short period of time, but Luonan did not have any intentions of taking things a step further. He simply walked past her and stepped onto the podium. Luonan did not immediately open his mouth to teach. He just lowered his head slightly, debugging the drawing software's work area while referring to the structural changes on the mental plane within the conference room. He sorted out the train of thought in his mind. The participants below the stage all displayed an enormous amount of patience. They did not even cough. The environment of the circular conference room actually transformed from silent and soundless to an even more extreme transformation. It had almost reached the point where a pin drop could be heard. Luonan tapped on the flexible e-ink screen. The subtle electronic sound appeared abnormally clear, so much so that Jianghu, who was beside him, had to deliberately tiptoe off the stage to avoid becoming the focus of everyone's attention. The reason why the venue was able to maintain such an atmosphere, aside from Luonan's extremely subversive lecture in the first half of the lecture, had to do with the snowflake-like external information that came flying in during the break. In the end, Luonan's theory teaching was a bit cryptic. Truthfully speaking, there were not many ability users present who could completely understand what he was saying. If the outside world's reaction was merely the clamoring and mutual explosions in the live broadcast room and the forums, everyone would just go back to what they were doing after the novelty and shock wore off. But the communications of the majority of people in the venue practically never stopped during the past 10 minutes of break. The information was like a swarm of bees. Practically all of them were related to Luonan's cage theory. A considerable portion of the messages were from friends and acquaintances present, asking questions on their behalf, or helping to record. Xia City's psychic wave network could record information on the mental plane. This was the most valuable content that the audience watching the live broadcast from thousands of kilometers away wanted to know. Under such circumstances, the live experience of 1,000 people quickly yielded to the collective consciousness of 30,000 people or even greater. Many people suddenly came to a realization in these 10 minutes or so. Oh my, the cage theory is this amazing? So I'm the one who got the big advantage? Could it be that I'm witnessing history? As the center of the storm, all the relevant information from the entire world converged here. The 10 minutes or so of information washed over them, completely correcting the collective cognition of the 1,477 ability users present in the venue. Even though there was an extremely small portion of people who disapproved, they were intimidated by the indescribable and inexplicable pressure of the group. They held their breaths, calmed their minds, and sat in silence, waiting. Luonan tidied up the details on stage. When he raised his head once more, he was greeted by over 1,000 gazes from the audience, seeking answers to their doubts, striving for progress, and striving for superiority. Well, now there was some significance in terms of structure. In Luonan's eyes, the scene on the mental plane right now was like an enormous tornado descending from the wasteland. Above it was a chaotic thundercloud that was borne by electromagnetic waves. Colored lines from various regions of the world converged within, and as time passed, they expanded at an astonishing speed. Their density increased substantially as well. This represented that the cage theory he released was rapidly spreading throughout the inner world and its related domains. It attracted more and more attention, discussion, and contemplation. This was an astonishing power. It was chaotic and berserk. Kindness and malice interweaved and rubbed against each other, bursting forth with malevolent and fierce electric flames. It originated from countless consciousness cages. It was the convergence of the thoughts and emotions of tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people. It was projected onto a corner of the planet using modern advanced communication technology as a medium. It was just a shadow. It was chaotic in nothingness, and it involved the complex mechanisms of the abyssal region and the polar region. It was extremely difficult to utilize. But it was precisely because of this terrifying dark side storm, the powerful group consciousness, and the corresponding communication technology that the material and mental planes worked at the same time. It caused an incorporeal yet powerful pressure to flow back to this circular conference room that could be called its source. The circular conference room became the eye of the storm. It acted as the hub, continuously radiating information to affect the consciousness of the outside world. The thundercloud also received the correction of the powerful reaction force of the thundercloud, becoming more and more orderly. And in a higher dimension, the human-faced arachnid sign was coldly looking down on everything. It was shameful to say that 99% of the ability users in the conference room were flying insects on the spider web woven by the wraith sign. They were pierced through by Luonan's great benefits that pointed directly at the core of their lives. They became the fulcrum or the end of the enemy against 10,000 framework. It was under this framework that Luonan and the 1,000 or so participants in the conference room had an unimaginably close connection. And through these 1,000 or so people and the diffuse influence of the cage theory, Luonan was able to form a somewhat distant yet continuous connection with everyone who was paying attention to this lecture from all over the world. Luonan experienced the complex relationship between the various parties and corrected his somewhat excessively harsh judgment standards from before. There was still some meaning to it. At the very least, the overall structure had been shaped. The direction was okay and the effects had already manifested. This was more or less an achievement. Next was the time to accumulate the details. He looked at assistant number 1, which was still cut into 2 pieces. He shook his head and clicked the rollback operation in the work area, restoring it to its original state. Then he spoke. For the sake of illustrating, number 1's configuration thought wasn't presented accurately enough. No one expected that Luonan's first words after he took the stage would be to correct what he said in the first half of the lecture. But the conference room was still extremely quiet. They had enough patience to understand his meaning. In comparison, a certain person's reaction was much more intense in the distant deep blue base. See? He's already denying himself. He doesn't have any confidence in what he said just now. None of the investors paid attention to Yen Hong's neurotic behavior. Bald Jeff only shot him a glance and continued to seriously watch the live broadcast from the circular conference room. Luo Nan nodded at assistant number 1, who was still wrapped in a bubble. He spoke with a steady tone. We talk about the Tower of Babel and Mount Buzhou. They are used to describe the difference in ability and realm from the bottom to the top. But in reality, it should be from the inside to the outside. From the I to the not I. It's a process of internalization and then diffusion. Here's a better diagram that can be used to express. As he spoke, Luo Nan took out the visualization diagram that had already been engraved into the depths of his soul. It was the structure of a tetrahedron, its inscribed sphere and its circumscribed sphere. Since assistant number 1 had a layer of bubble outside its body, Luo Nan only needed to use this foundation to make a tangent tetrahedron and add the circumscribed sphere. It was enough. The diagram was very simple, but the meaning behind it was extraordinary. If Luo Nan remembered correctly, this was the largest demonstration of the formatting theory system that he had ever done in his hands. Over 35,000 ability users were listening, comprehending, pondering, and even nitpicking and attacking. Here, Luo Nan used a rather restrained attitude to narrate the following contents. He didn't give the ability users present a long lecture on the philosophical speculations of the self format, the social format, and the heaven and earth format. He just used this diagram to continue the topic of the first half of the lecture. If we use this diagram as a configuration train of thought, I believe it's quite appropriate. We can consider the inscribed sphere in the center to be the fundamental unit that mobilizes the functions of the human body. It involves every layer and every system of the human body. Muscles, bones, nerves, internal organs, and it's even possible to probe down to the genetic level. This part involves a great deal of knowledge. It's extremely complex and precise. I'm afraid that every step forward will be very difficult. Now that I think about it, Gym Master Xiao, who taught me body techniques, once described this part of knowledge as a spark. If I can make a breakthrough in this aspect, it will be like xianxia of the East or Prometheus of the West. I can bring about a historical change to the human race. But unfortunately, as far as I know, we still haven't made a decisive breakthrough. The military, the government, and quantum corporation are all using human body modification technology as well as the transfer and conversion of external energy to forcefully surpass this stage. There are records of success in this aspect in the fleshly side of the martial legacy lineage, but it relies too much on talent. It has extremely high requirements for willpower. It's very difficult for it to be universal. Luo Nan shot a glance at Shuelei as he spoke, and Shuelei grinned. Luo Nan laughed as well. What's worth rejoicing about is that as ability users, we've already used various methods to skip this step. This isn't the focus of today's lecture. Luo Nan spoke quite a bit, but the conclusion he reached in the end was more or less disappointing. A few voices of discussion began to rise below the stage. Naturally, a certain neurotic had already replaced the function of a certain paid guest. With emotions that were 100 times more intense than a normal person's, he spat out saliva and germs. See? I told you. He doesn't have any real results at all. He's just flaunting his eloquence. I can say these words even if I'm on stage. I can't compare to him. Shut up. Jeff glared fiercely. Yen Hong's current performance made him suspect whether or not letting this fellow continue to be the person in charge of Team 4 was a serious insult to his intelligence and leadership. One moment he said he wanted to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. The next moment he said it wasn't worth mentioning. Did he have any basic logic? Is this your evaluation of the competitor's project as the person in charge of Team 4? You're going to use this as the final result and put it on file? Yen Hong was stupefied for a moment. Before he could reply, Wang Yu looked at him and said, "Team leader Yen can go calm down." And then. There was no then. Luo Nan was able to feel some particularly negative threads within the surging thundercloud. But he didn't split his energy on them. He just used his finger to trace across the edges and corners of the tetrahedron that had just taken shape. I'm done talking about the basic unit. If we extend outwards, it's the central unit that is maintained by the extraordinary power extracted from our bodies. It's weak, but it also possesses strong plasticity. His finger continued to trace outwards, cutting across the arc of the external sphere. If we continue to walk outwards, there's also the high-end operational expansion unit. The condensation ring, or perhaps I should say the dripping sword. The majority of the structure belongs to this layer. But the portion that only exists in this central unit is enough for us to enjoy endless benefits. Luo Nan's finger hooked back. Everyone should have already thought of it. Today we're going to talk about the central unit, and the domain it is used in is basically what we call the mental plane. This is also the domain we are most familiar with. It's the domain we are most suited to use. Many people were nodding their heads at this moment, including Deep Blue Base's Baldy Jeff. A very pragmatic consideration, and the division is very clear. Just from this point alone, we can see that he already possesses the basic thinking of configuration design. This sort of evaluation was quite complicated for all the investors present. Luo Nan's current state of mind was more calm and unhurried than everyone who was listening to his lecture. He didn't pause at all as he directly spoke. I've already made the cage hypothesis, and I will continue to proceed according to this hypothesis. It is precisely because of this that we must first resolve some understanding problems caused by our previous hypothesis. I've seen the questions everyone has sent me. Quite a few of them wish for me to bring out sufficiently convincing experimental data. This is truly a bit difficult for me. I haven't even truly started on the path of scientific research. It's just that I've cultivated in accordance with formatting theory all year round that I've obtained some rather special observation and clairvoyance abilities. Rather than saying that I've proven something, it's better to say that I've seen something. I'm different from the vast majority of people. Yes, this is precisely the original intention of Her Majesty Empress Wu in forcing me onto the stage. Soft laughter rang out below the stage, followed by a buzzing discussion that was difficult to suppress. Many people were able to understand the meaning behind Luo Nan's words by now. Yes, right now I will share the results of my observations and clairvoyance with everyone. According to the requirements of cage theory and formatting theory, I can confirm that what I see is the result of the active exploration of pure supernatural power. It is the greatest limit of abandoning the various illusions formed from passive reception of external information. This is my understanding of this world at a certain stage. I hope it will be of some help to everyone. The venue was no longer calm, but nearly 1,500 pairs of eyes were still focused on the stage. Not only that, but their minds were highly focused as well. They used all forms of perception to grasp the somewhat cryptic and abstract speech of the young man on the stage. However, Luo Nan's formal lecture began with a figurative metaphor. In my eyes, the mental world is a vast ocean. The circular conference room was in an uproar once more. Why did he go back? Luo Nan didn't stop. He continued speaking. We are a part of it. Every single one of us is a bead of water. Perhaps there are quite a few life forms that we have yet to understand within, such as the mutants. And so, beads of water are beads of water. From 1 to 10,000, from 10,000 to 100 million, to a trillion, to infinity. Everything comes together to ultimately form a boundless ocean. Chapter 563. It was around 9:20 in the evening in Xia City. 5 minutes after the second half of Luo Nan's class began, the video from the circular conference room had already entered the field of vision of practically every relevant person and group through all sorts of channels. It was like a rising tide overflowing a desolate beach. There was no place that could be spared. And on a certain luxurious cruise ship in the seas outside of Xia City, the program, Mutual Observation, practically burned money to discuss cooperation with Jianghu's behind-the-scenes team and the broadcasting platform. They began broadcasting at lightning speed. Their gimmick was undoubtedly the veteran extraordinary Ghost Eye Che Yi's evaluation and judgment of the subversive speech of the genius of Xia City, Luo Nan. This sort of attention-grabbing program was of an extremely professional standard. It was simply a perfect combination of business and style. However, there were always some surprises in everything. As the main character of the talk show, Ghost Eye, that old pervert, was actually able to probe his own bottom line once more. He was clearly a professional, but he just had to compete with dirty jokes. He practically turned a blind eye to the cage theory of the first half of the program after the break started broadcasting. Instead, the beautiful host's face and ears were flushed and she was drenched in fragrant sweat. The behind-the-scenes director had already forced himself to remind Ghost Eye many times, but Ghost Eye just ignored him. And when the second half of the program officially began, Ghost Eye didn't have any intention of restraining himself. Dan E. read the question transmitted by the behind-the-scenes personnel. The expression of the sea of the mind should belong to the category of classical theory. Do you think Luo Nan's current speech is an interpretation from a new angle, or is it a return to a conservative consciousness? It doesn't matter if it's open or conservative, as long as the person is beautiful. Yes, it's fine as long as the theory is beautiful. Dan E. secretly ground her teeth. She tried to probe deeper. Then you think that Luonan's current theory is beautiful? This phrase is quite good to use to describe you. Why do you need to separate it? The people in front of the stage and behind the scenes were about to go crazy. Ghost Eye's attitude could perhaps give the editor of the website some inspiration. They could concoct an eye-catching article, frivolous versus frivolous. Ghost Eye teaches the Squirkin man how to attract attention. But it was simply a disaster for the program. The director and producer couldn't do anything to Ghost Eye, so in the end, they could only vent their anger on the host. Through the earpiece, they roared at Dan E, who had big breasts, a slender waist and long legs but lacked the skills to control the situation. Originally, Danny was about to go crazy because of Ghost Eye. Ghost Eye lost interest when he saw that the situation had developed to this point. He waved his hand, no longer teasing these juniors who couldn't take the fright. I'm just asking myself a few questions. Forget it. I'm more confident in the professional level of your legal department. Mr. Che then. Continue. Don't cry anymore, Miss Dan. You're making my heart ache. Ghost Eye chuckled as he gently caressed Dan Yi's back. He half pulled her into his embrace. He didn't seem to have the airs of an extraordinary. Instead, he looked like a salty guy who took advantage of the situation. It was impossible to tell that he was the main culprit who nearly caused the entire program crew to piss themselves. He even bypassed the host and propped up the program by himself. There was a bit of an accident just now. I hope everyone doesn't mind. Everyone, please focus your attention on the class. Look at our Professor Luo. How appropriate. The physiognomy program also had an interactive platform. The platform had been bombarded with messages when the live broadcast incident occurred. Looking at it now, one could see a large pile of horrified expressions. I pissed myself. I thought I was going to send a wreath to the program crew. Sister Baijiu, hurry up and save me. Master Ghost Eye, calm down. Don't get the sequence wrong. I'm a step too late. The chaotic messages were of no significance to Ghost Eye. He swept through them in a straightforward manner, clearing the screen. He saw Luonan draw the corresponding diagram of turbid flow. He faced the live broadcast camera and chuckled. Actually, I'm quite interested in the cage theory. When a certain level is reached, ability users construct a domain based on their self-knowledge. This is especially true for the mental side's extraordinary domain. It's more or less the same train of thought. Does this mean he agrees? The idlers who wanted to watch the show but were unable to do so expressed shock one after another when they saw Ghost Eye express his opinion. After all, the subversive nature of the speech was one thing. Obtaining the approval of an extraordinary would produce a qualitative change. Did I agree? Frankly speaking, I don't know either. Ghost Eye's one-man show was quite outstanding, but he still remembered the pitiful Dan E beside him. He turned his head and asked, "What senses do you use in the mental world?" Danny was a bit out of breath from crying. She was still a bit muddle-headed right now. She answered subconsciously, "I'm not of the mental side. I use soul strength." She thought that Ghost Eye's question would be very high level, but halfway through she realized that it was completely basic common sense. Danny was so embarrassed that her face turned red when she changed her answer midway. Ghost Eye didn't mind. He continued, "That's right. Soul strength is the senses of the mental world. There is no external source of light in the mental world. If you want a clairvoyance with others, you must first release light. The further you look, the more intense the light becomes. What you see then is the complete mental world, right? What you see is only the area covered by the light. In reality, no matter how bright your headlights are, you won't be able to move the pavement, the rocks, or the buildings. But in the mental world, your light is like a gale or a whirlpool. Everything is blown away. Everything is distorted. What you see is forever the result of the distortion. There is nothing else." He spread his hands. "What can I agree to under these circumstances? What can I deny?" Dan E finally controlled her emotions at this time. At the same time, her attention was attracted by Ghost Eye's explanation. She asked subconsciously, "Is it the same even in the Abyss region's polar domain?" Ghost Eye laughed involuntarily. "When you reach the Abyss region's polar domain, you don't even have enough time to be disoriented. What do you want? To put it bluntly, the mental world is too sensitive and too chaotic. It's absolutely not a good object of observation. To be able to say that one is able to clearly see the mental world, one is either a swindler or an almighty." Danny really got into the zone under Ghost Eye's guidance. She followed up with a question, "Then do you think Luonan is a swindler or an almighty?" Alright. This is Luonan's information, right? Ghost Eye reverted to his old ways without any warning. He avoided Dan Yi's questioning and played a slippery trick. Next, he flipped through Luo Nan's relevant information in front of tens of thousands of spectators. Halfway through, Luo Nan had already finished drawing an ocean of blurred colors on the other side of the circular conference room. He indicated that this was the direct visual reflection of the mental world that he saw. Ability users have a clear advantage in the sea of the mental world, but we shouldn't overestimate it. In fact, there's no need for special powers. Revealing pictures of the opposite sex is enough to influence everyone's instinctive reactions. Another wave of laughter rang out within the conference room. Practically none of the 1,000 spectators present knew of the live broadcast incident in the open sea. They had already unwittingly fallen into the context that Luo Nan had woven. They were completely engrossed, their minds devoid of distractions. Luo Nan split a strand of his mind from beginning to end to pay attention to the scene on the mental plane within the conference room area. He was quite satisfied with the current situation. He maintained this rhythm and continued, "This sort of neural reflex is closely related to primal instincts. It can also be considered a type of conscious activity. It's the level closest to the material plane, the shallow zone. Someone below the stage combined this with universal theory?" But Luo Nan shook his head. "Everyone, there's no need to classify a complex environment into layers. I'm more used to calling it turbid flow, taking its meaning of turbidity and chaos. Its interaction is very powerful, especially in the current information age. As long as there's a signal, a beautiful streamer can tug at your heartstrings from a distance of 10,000 kilometers. The virtual game designed by the toe-scratching burly man can create an environment of radio waves and light. It can also make you addicted. The lower limit of the mental plane is extremely low. The lower the limit, the easier it is to be affected. It's constantly being attacked and shaken, but our life force also comes from within. It's impossible to completely break away from it. We wish to effectively control our power. For this reason, we enter the plane of reason. We use reason to control it. However, rational thought that is established on a material foundation is far too precise. When it collides with the needs of the flesh at the bottom, reason will always be the loser. Pure desire and pure reason won't work. So we combine them together. There's a name for it here. It's called imagination. We can gather the most information and energy by reasonably utilizing imagination. In reality, we need to use all of our resources in order to form an extraordinary power. We need to prop up a domain bubble that can burst at any time. This domain isn't easy to come by, but our foundation is fundamentally shaky. All of the mental activities that are established on this foundation are shaky as well. What do we need to do under these circumstances? The mentally retarded question was practically laid out in front of them. The audience was happy to answer it. Stabilize. Hold on. We need to stabilize it. Though they were all talking at the same time, their opinions were always unified. Luo Nan nodded. That's right. We need to make up for what we lack. We need stability. We need to hold on for as long as possible. Only in this way can we eliminate the problems that we bring to our bones. Of course, even though I haven't been in contact with the inner world for a long time, I've received pointers from my teacher during my time studying xuanhu. I know that every school of thought and every person has similar methods of doing things. Consciously and unconsciously, I've already carried out this sort of stabilizing work. Speaking further, Buddhism has the precepts of tranquility and wisdom. Taoism has the mindfulness of meditation and forgetfulness. Confucianism has the knowledge, calmness, tranquility, and contemplation. There are also all sorts of traditional meditation methods and religious rituals. No matter which one it is, concentration and entering a meditative state are all extremely important links. These links are all for the sake of counteracting the root of the problem, reducing the effects of instability. Modern research has also shown that concentration can increase the precision of the operation of the consciousness. It can expand the scale and form a high-speed reaction to specific objects. Some researchers even say that the consciousness is nothing more than an instantaneous photograph of the surrounding environment. It's close to a movie. It's a series of still frames stitched together. Each frame is only a few dozen to a few hundred milliseconds. If we can increase the precision and scale, we can always maintain a reaction speed of 10 milliseconds. Then we will form an enormous, even essential difference from others who can only form images in 1 or 200 milliseconds. Your perception and reaction speed will be 10 times faster than others. Correspondingly, the operation speed of this world will be 10 times slower. Your control over the world will be super strong and your operation will be super easy. Luo Nan was able to catch his breath with great difficulty after saying such a long string of words. He laughed a bit embarrassedly. I know that these are all clichés, but I'm just using this to emphasize the importance of the element of stability, as well as the efforts we've made before, both consciously and unconsciously. For the next short period of time, our topic is to try a new method on the basis of traditional methods. We will use our extraordinary powers to allow our own domain to maintain an effective, stable, and controllable structure. We will allow internal and external energy and information to flow. We will do our best to resist the interference of the overly crowded mental environment. Yes, this is the method of configuration. Simply put, it is to use configuration to cultivate. Just like what worker Zhai did before. Luo Nan roughly cleaned up the work area. Whether it was assistant number 1 or the model of the condensation ring he had drawn earlier, he put them all into the recycle bin. As he did these things, he said, using configuration to cultivate, I recommend that you study the structure of the Tower of Babel for the fleshly side. As for the mental side, the condensation ring we'll be talking about today should be the best choice for now. But no matter which one you choose, stability. Remember, stability is the goal you must pursue. Next, we might as well do an autopsy. We'll get down to the details and try to analyze the structure of the Tower of Babel and the condensation ring. Which structures are designed for stability? And which ones extend out from within? What direction should we focus on in actual cultivation? On a cruise ship in the open seas of Xia City, in the work area of the program looking at faces, Danny sniffed a bit. She gradually entered the right track under the guidance of the director. It looks like this genius of Xia City is going to enter more substantial content from discourse. We are looking forward to it. A friend on the interactive platform just now said, Senior Ghost Eye and Luo Nan seem to be singing the same tune. Is Luo Nan's opinion really in line with your intentions? Ghost Eye was still flipping through the materials evaluating Luo Nan. He responded lazily, everyone has their own preferences. While I approve of it, there will certainly be extraordinaries who oppose it. And it's not just one. I just said that the mental world is too turbid. The results of everyone's clairvoyance will be different. There's a huge difference. Danny blinked her eyes and said, if every extraordinaire has a different view, then where did the basic theories that we currently accept come from? They come from arguing. Ha! Isn't discussion, exchange, and debate the same as arguing in the end? In the end, it all depends on whose voice is louder and whose fist is harder. You can use your principles to form extraordinary power to beat me into a pig's head, so I can only acknowledge you. You have similar ideals, and there are many people with many accomplishments. I'm just a single old man. I can't beat you, so I'll acknowledge you. If both sides are evenly matched and no one can convince the other, then we'll compromise. It's that simple. Dan E wasn't the only one who was a bit stupefied. All the ability users watching the program, looking at faces, had their brains go a bit numb when they heard this answer. Then should Mr. Luo's theory also be? Ghost Eye laughed loudly. It's a bit early to talk about this. Everyone knows who's protecting Xia City right now. Professor Luo's lectures are inspired by someone. If they protect him... Oh, then again, what do Ouyang and the martial monarch think? There's also a bunch of guys joining in on the fun. This is quite worth guessing. Dan Yi's mind was filled with good fortune when she heard Ghost Eye say this. She had a flash of inspiration, and she opened her mouth to ask the most professional question of the day. It's not like we're arguing with everyone we see. You didn't lower yourself to our level just now. What sort of standards do we have to reach in order to be able to argue with each other? About this? Ghost Eye hesitated for a moment, but he didn't avoid it in the end. According to our Professor Luo's theory, we need to break through that cage no matter what. We need to be relatively free to enter and exit the function. According to the general theory, if someone uses this theory of his to enter the abyssal region, then they can basically enter the evaluation standard. It's still early. It's still early. There needs to be a fermentation process. Right at this time, Luo Nan was holding an electronic pen in the circular conference room. He was about to drop it down. Right now, let's say we want to create a brand new configuration. We need to have a framework to choose from. Here, I recommend the condensation ring's ring-shaped structure. It's simple, conforms to the habits of human psychology, and it gives us enough room to operate. He was just about to pick up the pen as he spoke, but he shook his head in the next second. Because this structure is a temporary design. It's just an experiment. I'm not sure if I can use light to realize interference on the mental plane. If everyone doesn't mind, I'll just use my soul strength to sketch it out. Quite a few people in the conference room thought of the word violation, but they didn't care about the answer that was about to be announced. They immediately agreed one after another. However, the 30,000 viewers of the live broadcast weren't happy. Not to mention the value of this demonstration, Luo Nan's sketch on the mental plane wasn't even giving them any attention. They also wanted to be violated. Ah no, they wanted to be able to see it with their own eyes. Jianghu was the host, so she naturally became the representative. She stood up and raised her hand. For the sake of over 30,000 comrades, Mr. Luo, can you still use the previous method? These words actually carried a bit of hidden sarcasm. The audience in the conference room immediately became vexed. Our Xia city's internal training is a bit too broad. This is supposed to be a secret technique. Do you really want to make it known to the entire world? Didn't you say Xia Puff? Didn't you say Spray Pot Guy? Why did you remember it now? What's wrong with you? The circular conference room became very noisy. Luo Nan muttered to himself for a moment and laughed. I still have more confidence in outlining with my soul strength. But I can try to interfere in the opposite direction. I just need to spend a bit more effort. He tossed the electronic pen down as he spoke, but the work area flickered with a red lustrous glow. It was a bit sluggish at first, but the pen quickly recovered to its original liveliness. This was the effect of soul strength, but soul strength was incorporeal. It didn't have any color to speak of. This was completely the result of Luo Nan forcefully interfering with the material plane with his soul strength. Low gasps of admiration rang throughout the conference room. Everyone present was an industry insider. They knew how difficult it was to do this. Using soul strength to interfere with light waves in the opposite direction was just a simple matter, but the nature of soul strength was different. There were many types of soul strength. Some people could use mental storms to kill people, but it was impossible for Luo Nan to teleport objects and pour himself a cup of water. Luo Nan was famous for his long-range senses. What people were most familiar with was the infrasonic wave array. Now he could interfere with light waves and affect the activity of photons. What kind of adjustment ability was this? What kind of aptitude and potential did he have? Papercut subconsciously rubbed his face. He looked at the current situation and thought back to a month ago. Everyone was still distressed over Luo Nan's paper-blowing interference power. They really suspected that they were in a dream. He spat out a turbid breath. His eyes strained and his mind strained as well. He looked more carefully. Luo Nan swept his gaze below the stage. His smile was a bit subtle. Actually, he didn't have the ability to actually compete with photons. He relied on the powerful force field of the altar's frame to create a temporary distortion. Everyone present was actually helping him. And because of this, the strokes of soul strength carried a heavy blood color. It was as if they were drawn with a cinnabar brush, bright and eye-catching. This was the reflection of the life strength of several thousand ability users in Xia City. Chapter 564. Luo Nan stood on the lectern. His hands were motionless, and the blood-red ring had already outlined its overall shape. From the looks of it, it was already a little like a configuration. When it was placed next to the enlarged condensation ring that had been demonstrated previously, it didn't look much different at first glance. But Luo Nan understood more than anyone else that this was just a toy used for demonstration. Even the structure of the main body, which was temporarily stabilized on the mental plane, was at least 2 levels lower than the true configuration. According to Luo Nan's stumbling translation of the Virtual Brain System's user manual these past 2 days, a qualified configuration should represent the transcendence of the form and soul of life within the system. It should be stable and could be constructed. Just like the current ring. It basically belonged to the category of group consciousness. The mental worlds of over 1,000 people overlapped together. Under the influence of internal and external forces, it formed a special form that possessed extraordinary significance. It also possessed a certain function. But this wasn't a configuration. It was formed under the guidance and pressure of external forces. Its body wasn't stable and its interior was rather chaotic. Once it disintegrated, it would be impossible to reassemble it in a purely structural sense. Luo Nan's stability was admittedly the #1 priority in order for it to become a configuration. But how to restore it to a reasonable functional structure was a key problem that needed to be solved. Luo Nan didn't mention these things. He spoke with confidence and composure on the stage. No one could tell that he had no experience in configuration design at all. Today's demonstration on the lectern was the first time in his life. Now we have the framework and the design ideas. What we need to do next is to refine the structure. The goal is very simple. We need to guarantee the stability of the configuration. We need to eliminate the interference of the internal and external turbid flows as much as possible. This is the only function, so there's no need to make it too complicated. We just need to rely on a simple basic structure to prop up this frame. We should pay attention here. We look like architects, but the mental plane and the material plane are different in the end. We can't substitute a material structure inside. What we need is an effective structure in the mental world. Bamboo Pole in the front row raised his hand once more. Is there a standard for this so-called effective structure? Luo Nan smiled at him. Do I look like someone who can set a standard for a configuration? Bamboo Pole also smiled. It's hard to say today. It's hard to say tomorrow. Luo Nan wasn't prepared to expand on the side issues. He shook his head. If I were to say it now, the so-called effective structure only needs to be able to realize the circulation and operation of extraordinary power. But I feel that instead of trying to figure out new structures that have no foundation, it's better to borrow the existing results for the time being. He made a gesture, and a table appeared in the work area behind him. On it was a series of separate structural comparisons. The participants who had gone through the first half of the course vaguely remembered that Luo Nan had mentioned this when he had analyzed the Tower of Babel. It was dismantled from above. This is a simple analysis I did with the help of the computational space during my break. The idea was very simple. It was to see how much of the basic structure dismantled from the Tower of Babel was meaningful to the condensation ring. As I said in the first half, if I was given some time, I might be able to use the idea of the Tower of Babel to put together a condensation ring. This analysis was a proof of feasibility. For this reason, I tried to disassemble the condensation ring, but I failed miserably. I won't show you the specific results for now. I'll show you when I have the chance. But then, I used this foundation to compare the basic structures dismantled from both sides. The results are quite interesting. Luo Nan circled the key points with his digital pen. The structure at the very top of the table was a pair of curved and wedge-shaped structures. Looking at them with the naked eye, they were about the same. The data behind them was 92.4%. It was labeled the coincidence rate. This pair of similar structures. The one on the left comes from the Tower of Babel. I talked about it in the first half of the course. The one on the right comes from the condensation ring. This is the result of my rough dismantling. Everyone can see that the coincidence rate between the two is very high. Though the conditions set up might be a bit simple and the results are only for reference, I feel that there is only one point that proves the value of the connection between them. They both play the role of a stable framework in their respective configurations. This provides us with an excellent choice. Luo Nan's speech was extremely frank. It was tantamount to erasing all mysterious factors. He completely presented his design train of thought to the thousands of participants and the tens of thousands of spectators. So when he talked about this place, Deep Blue Base, Jeff directly contacted his subordinates from every division. He only had one request: immediately analyze the feasibility. Herman, who was in Luo City, shouted at his legal team, record it. Record it all. This is plagiarism. When the product hits the market, I'll make him go bankrupt. In the outer seas of Xia City, Danny was gradually getting into a good mood within the program group face reading. She tried to obtain a clear evaluation. Does Mr. Che believe that it will succeed based on the current train of thought? Ghost Eye didn't give her the chance. Instead, he flipped through Luo Nan's information even more seriously. His mouth was still muttering sentences that no one could hear clearly. No matter how the spectators evaluated, Luo Nan's explanation and demonstration weren't affected in the slightest. He had already begun to make his move on the podium right now. He drew a new outline next to the frame of the ring body he had drawn earlier. His mouth was also explaining. The condensation ring needs to pay attention to the condensation efficiency of water molecules. Its functions are more complex, so it only takes a few limited cycles to complete the entire structure. The optimization within is incomparable. But it doesn't matter if we drag things out a bit. Frankly speaking, we're just piecing together the basic structure over and over again. It's quite stupid, right? I think so too. Luo Nan drew very slowly and very carefully. He was more cautious than any of his previous operations. But in the eyes of the participants and spectators, this structure was much simpler and cruder than the condensation ring or the Tower of Babel. Frankly speaking, Roland had taken the curved wedge-shaped structure and made a slight mutation. He had stacked and arranged them together to form a complete ring body. Such a structure could be said to be concise and flat in a nicer way. To put it bluntly, it was like building blocks. Even a 3-year-old child playing with Lego would feel that this train of thought was far too low. The conference room was quite quiet at first, but after this detailed diagram structure was repeated 2 or 3 times, a buzzing sound gradually began to rise. Octopus, who was in the front row, twisted his head. He turned around and covered his mouth. He whispered, "This isn't good. Why do I feel like the atmosphere is about to collapse?" Bamboo Pole didn't reply. Papercut asked him, "Have you verified it yet?" "I've verified it and I've completed it. It's not difficult, but I can't see any results." Octopus was a member of the Xia City branch operation team. Even though he was famous for his drugs, his basic abilities were quite solid. It was easy for him to follow Luonan and walk through it. In fact, he completed it faster than Luonan. A total of 8 curved wedge-shaped structures were needed in order to complete the ring body. They were stacked upside down from top to bottom. They were divided into 4 groups of 2. The drawing method for each structure was the same. The stacking method within each group was the same. The connection method between each group was the same as well. And so on and so forth, cycling back and forth. In the end, a complete structure that wasn't complicated was formed. Luonan had purposefully slowed down for the sake of demonstrating and to take care of the majority of the non-awakened present. He had only drawn 3 groups up until now. He was at least 4 or 5 seconds away from completion. The awakened present, especially the mentally awakened, most of them didn't have this patience. They finished drawing early, but they couldn't see any results. It was hard to avoid being a bit impatient. This was most likely what Octopus heard from the discussion behind him. The inner world was like this. As long as you had concrete evidence, even if you spouted shit, people would still listen to you. But on the other hand, if you didn't have any results, then you would be slapped in the face no matter how extravagant your words were. Octopus didn't want to be slapped in the face. He was just worried. Don't work hard all night and end up getting blown away by the wind and rain. That would be too vexing. In fact, there were already people on the internet who couldn't wait to jump out and announce the result. 3 seconds to complete, then? That's it? The legendary anticlimactic ending. I've finally seen it. Is there a follow-up? Who hasn't finished drawing yet? Are you sure he's not thinking about how to wrap things up? At this time, the nearly forgotten Ari shrugged her shoulders in front of the camera. She suppressed the joy in her eyes and put on a calm expression. This kind of result from a completely uncreative patchwork. It's not a pleasant surprise, nor is it unexpected. The clamor outside the venue didn't matter to Luonan, but the buzzing noise inside the venue affected him. He finished his demonstration 5 seconds later and his brows furrowed. Quiet. There are still people who haven't finished. This configuration is primarily prepared for the unawakened. If the awakened present have spare energy, you can try to increase the difficulty yourself. For example, he snapped his fingers and a 3rd blood-colored ring appeared in the work area. The ability users watching the live broadcast didn't understand what was going on, but the buzzing noise in the venue had already changed. Octopus's eyes went wide. The speed. Hold on. How many sets? Papercut closed his eyes and observed from the mental plane. It seems like 16 sets? 32 sets. It's 4 times the number in an instant. There's this kind of operation? Luonan looked around the venue and said calmly, "Everyone can try again. Continue to stack the number. But you must pay attention. If you want this configuration to be meaningful, it must be tested so that its group, remember, group, will appear exponentially higher. The simplest is 4 sets. I just demonstrated 16 sets. Next will be 64 sets. Like this." Following a finger snap, Octopus cried out involuntarily, "Holy crap!" A 4th blood-colored ring appeared in front of Luonan at this moment. It was meaningless to discern it with the naked eye, but many people could discern its internal structure on the mental plane. Chapter 565. After confirming everything inside and outside, the crowd was a little dumbfounded, and the audience was in an uproar. Really? It's doubled again. My condolences for your early death. This is the index, okay? Did you copy and paste it? Why don't you try making a copy? That means he's already storing up energy when he's talking. Well, how long do you need to complete a basic wedge-shaped module? It's 0. For seconds here. 1 seconds of newbie shivering. A piece of trash who doesn't care about the time to seek relief. Luonan didn't care what the audience inside and outside of the podium thought. He turned his head to look at the progress of the non-awakened on both sides of the podium. He reminded them, it doesn't matter if you're unable to finish quickly right now. You just need to practice more in the future. Oh, they're all done. No one understood how Luonan was able to confirm this, but they all saw it at this moment. The youth on the stage snapped his fingers once more, and a clear ringing sound accompanied the appearance of the 5th blood ring. At this moment, the thousands of aptitude users on the field felt as if their scalps, faces, and skin all over their bodies had been electrified. They felt numb all the way from their heads to the soles of their feet. There was no doubt that this was not a psychological effect, but a baptism of some kind of interference force from the outside. The venue was a little chaotic because at this moment, they felt their hearts sink, as if they were being run over by a silent vibration at close range. They thought about Luo Nan's beautiful reputation as the humanoid infrasonic array. Don't blame them for pondering over it. Luo Nan raised his hand to pacify them. I won't force you guys to make this 256 groups and 512 pieces structure for now. Luo Nan's words were cut off by the clamorous waves of noise within the venue. Some people in the back row had already stood up and were looking forward. Some people in the front row craned their necks. Some people closed their eyes. They wanted to figure out if what Luo Nan said was true or not. It was impossible for the naked eye to make out such an exquisite structure. But if the configuration on the mental plane was not part of Luo Nan's invasive hallucination, then the answer was certain. Bamboo Pole subconsciously sat up straight and stared blankly at the podium for a while. Then he rubbed his face hard to wake himself up. Even though he felt that he had always been calm, he was still suffocated by that person on the stage. It was probably because he got to know Luo Nan far too early. He was used to seeing Luo Nan's inexperienced appearance. He always treated Luo Nan as a young genius with enormous potential that had yet to be fully displayed. However, in the blink of an eye, the talent of a genius suddenly materialized. What was even more frightening was that he still couldn't see the bottom, nor could he see the edge. Can I change to formatting theory now? Octopus took out a medicine bottle from somewhere and rubbed it in his hand. It seemed that as long as someone agreed, he would immediately open a bottle of medicine and embark on a new journey. Stop fooling around. Luo Nan couldn't hear who had interrupted his delusion amidst his daze. But Luo Nan had already followed up with the previous words. I'm just using this structure to do a verification. Among your works just now, did any of them collapse? I know there must be. If it collapses, it means that I failed and I need to redo it. The entire audience, including everyone watching the live broadcast, had stupefied expressions. They didn't understand the logic behind Luo Nan's words at all. However, the inner world was like this. As long as you're awesome, even if I'm stupid and become an idiot, I'll accept it. Some people immediately lowered their heads to examine their own works. At the same time, they would steal glances at others to see if they could find someone who was suffering the same fate as them. Luo Nan continued, everyone don't worry. Although the cage is very stubborn internally, it has long been oppressed in the sea of consciousness. Beads of water, bubbles, and unstable states are its normal state. The collapse of a configuration that is built on this foundation isn't scary at all. Actually, this structure is extremely simple. If you guys are extremely diligent in doing it, focused enough, and maintain the precision of the structure, then the most basic 4 sets shouldn't be difficult. As for the accumulation of exponential principles, C rank or B rank on the mental side can give it a try. I feel that completing 16 sets in 1 second shouldn't be a problem for AC rank. AB rank should be able to complete 64 sets in 1 second. It shouldn't be too difficult either. The truly challenging part is at the back, but that's just a matter of intensity. Someone said an old cliché in the live broadcast room at this time. I don't know if I should say MMP or not. The MMP in the live broadcast room exploded in an instant, interspersed with countless emojis covering their faces and crying bitterly. Luo Nan looked at his watch. I'll give everyone another 10 minutes of time. It won't be a problem as long as everyone is able to create the basic 4 sets of configuration in this environment. Luo Nan let out a breath in secret after he finished speaking. Admittedly, the inspiration and analysis of the Tower of Babel and the condensation ring came from the Tower of Babel. But frankly speaking, the final structural train of thought still came from the user manual of the virtual brain system. This method of infinite composition of the curved wedge structure was a small example from the user manual. It was used to introduce the configuration design and the corresponding design verification method. Before a configuration could be used as a dynamo core or a spirit core, it was necessary to go through the steps to see if every part of the structure conformed to the standard. It was feasible so as to avoid damaging precious materials. Luo Nan didn't bite off more than he could chew. He didn't have any thoughts of pursuing perfection. He was a novice from head to toe when it came to configuration design. He could clearly distinguish the difference between imagination and delusion. Finding the curved wedge structure in the user manual that corresponded to reality was already a pleasant surprise. If he didn't copy a ready-made example and insisted on inventing and creating something, the 1,000+ ability users of Xia City present wouldn't be able to withstand his calamity, even if he had the mind to do so. The class was nearing its end, and Luonan wanted to have a good ending. He seized the time to review the short introduction in the user manual once more. He wanted to see if he had missed anything and if there were areas that could be improved. But not even a minute passed before someone raised their hand. "Mr. Luo, isn't your teaching method a bit unfriendly to the fleshly side?" Luonan was stunned for a moment, then he immediately laughed. "I can introduce my teacher to the fleshly side's training method. As for right now." There were about 100 people in the conference room who were fleshly side. The vast majority of these people came to join in the fun. None of them had any hopes of actually getting any breakthroughs from the class. They mainly came to get familiar with each other. It could be considered a disguised social activity. But now that the group atmosphere had risen, it was hard for those who had nothing to do to avoid feeling a bit ostracized. Figuratively speaking, they were restless. In this kind of situation, once someone took the lead, the others couldn't help but show some enthusiasm and helplessness, right? 100 people could create quite a bit of noise. The conference room was a bit chaotic. In the end, even Shui Lei raised his hand to ask, "I feel that my power becomes congealed when it reaches the mental plane. It's very hard to reforge it. What should I do now?" Luonan had a bit of a headache when faced with his friend's earnest and inquisitive gaze. The mental state of these 100 fleshly side people actually met the standard. They were a part of the group consciousness. It would be too much of a pity to abandon them, and it wouldn't be beneficial to maintaining the overall state. However, the fleshly side and the mental side were good in different directions. This wasn't something that could be handled by a simple configuration. Within the virtual brain system, this was the domain of the dynamo core. Compared to the configuration, the dynamo core's direct function was simplification and practicality. The dynamo core could take an extremely complex configuration and preserve it in the form of a physical object. It would be convenient for later use, or for further research and improvement. Just like the current group mental structure of the conference room. Luonan needed to do something similar to what he did today in order to create this state next time. He needed to use subversive remarks and irrefutable facts to guide the minds of over 1,000 participants and influence the thoughts of several tens of thousands of ability users. Only then could the dynamo core take shape. Such conditions were already something that could be encountered but not sought. But if the current state could be transformed into a configuration, or if he took it a step further and made this configuration into a dynamo core, then he only needed to gather a group of people and pour their soul strength into it. The dynamo core of a burner was also like this. It could greatly reduce the difficulty of control and increase the degree of stability. But this was too far away. After all, transforming a configuration into a dynamo core involved a complex process of changing from me to not me. Not only did it require the corresponding equipment, it also required extremely high technical requirements for the operator. Luonan was temporarily unable to reach this level. He stood on the stage feeling powerless for the first time. Yuan contacted him in private while he was in a daze. "Perhaps you can demonstrate it through the xianxia." Xianxia? The psychic wave network? Luonan was stunned for a few seconds. His train of thought suddenly opened up. Perhaps it really is possible? President Ouyang and the others established the psychic wave network. In a certain sense, the psychic wave network transformed the different characteristics of every ability user into psychic waves that could be used for common communication. This already involved an extremely profound transformation problem. It was similar to the technology provided by the virtual brain system, especially at the level of the simulator. Luonan had seen the psychic wave network more than once that the fake could be passed off as the real. There were interference modules that could simply turn the fake into the real. If the psychic wave network was used as a medium, then the boundary between real and fake would be infinitely blurred. Luonan was greatly moved for a time. He asked, "Is it convenient?" "You can open a fixed port. I've done it before during the training demonstrations. The results are okay." "How wonderful." Speaking of which, this was a benefit only members of the Xia City branch could enjoy. In any case, he could give it a try. Luonan snapped his fingers in great delight, scaring everyone inside and outside. They thought that the 1024 sets of super templates had come into being. Luonan wasn't greedy. He said, "How about this? Sister Yuan has a very good suggestion. We can practice on the psychic wave network. Next, I'll set up a new template in the public space of the psychic wave network. All friends who have fleshly bodies can follow the template and practice. It should be effective." Others who find it difficult for the time being can also practice through this method. He saw through the thoughts of the attendees and immediately said, "Everyone, there's no need to care too much about the intensity. The one providing the intensity isn't you yourselves. Or perhaps it's better to say that it isn't only you yourselves." Luonan had already finished setting up the template of the public space amidst the muddled expressions of most people. He announced the number and allowed the ability users present to freely choose whether or not they wanted to practice. This small interlude didn't affect the overall atmosphere. The number of people talking in the venue grew fewer and fewer. The group consciousness grew more and more cohesive. While Luonan was setting up the public space, it was Gao Meng's turn to look at Ouyang Qin in the Psychic Wave Network Maintenance Center, 10 floors away from the circular conference room within the Shangding building. Chapter 566. At this moment, Gao Meng's atmosphere was rather foul. This was because he had taken out talismans and folded them over and over again during the previous lesson. After nearly 2 hours of lesson, he had already burnt 7 or 8 talismans. His whole body was filled with the smell of soot. Finally, he could not help but ask, "Ouyang, what do you think about the theoretical basis of the bloody ring? Is that cage theory?" Ouyang Qin thought for a moment and said, "The description is very careful. It has always excluded the influence of the Abyss region." "That's it? To be able to consider the influence of the Abyss region on the 3 zones, is that not enough?" Looking at Gao Meng's disapproving expression, Ouyang Qin finally broke into laughter. "Alright, what I mean is, to be able to use a hypothesis to integrate the 3 belts phenomenon, whether it's correct or not, it's extremely valuable." Only then did Gao Meng turn from annoyance to joy. Right. I also feel that the more he does this, the more he understands the Abyss region. He is much better than those dreamers who blindly guess from multiple dimensions. You see, I have experimented quite a few times. Following this path, many of the previous problems have been explained. The most amazing thing is that there is no outline for the time being. Oh, this is really amazing. Ouyang Qin nodded slightly. He stared at the projection interface and said in a low voice, "After all, there are still conditions. If he can go one step further." Gao Meng laughed, "You are too much. If he goes one step further, how can he be taught in the beginner class? Even now, I feel that it is a bit too much. Let him go to the advanced class later?" "That is not a problem." Ouyang Qin replied very decisively and added, "I am considering whether to open a research project for him and organize a team first. It would be a pity if I don't investigate further." "Research project? You want him to lead a team?" While Gao Meng was in a daze, the staff had already reported the results to the 2 big shots. The bloody ring model has been established. Beginning conversion. Current conversion rate is 17.3%. Steadily increasing. Interference rate not shown. No interference rate? Gao Meng frowned. It is because it is a pure spiritual configuration. Ouyang Qin did not comment. Let's see. Gao Meng folded the yellow talisman in his hand. He was a little hesitant. In the psychic wave network system, the model conversion ratio and interference rate were 2 hard indicators. The former reflected the adaptability of the model module to the psychic wave network, and it was the standard to judge whether a developed product was suitable for the psychic wave network system. The latter had more practical significance. It represented the specific effect a model could have on the material plane through the psychic wave network. Under normal circumstances, the interference rate of the psychic wave network to the Xia city was around 2% to 3%. This was enough to ensure communication. During war, the interference rate would soar to 10%, powerful interference rate. During war, interference rate would rise to over 10%. If it was a larger scale battle, especially a powerful conflict, the interference rate had to be above 20% to be safe. For instance, last time when the motorcycle gang was chasing after Luonan, the interference rate of the psychic wave network in the combat area was constantly approaching 25%. That was already the limit under normal circumstances. Ring. The interference rate would be Yang Luo more interference rate. The interference rate would time and would be the interference rate. The city would. The interference rate. Of course, Gao Meng didn't expect Luonan's Bloodwill Ring's interference rate to exceed 25%. He didn't even need it to exceed 10%. Gao Meng did not expect the interference rate of Luonan's Blood Intent Ring to exceed 25%. He did not even need 10%. It was not a war anyway. However, the monitoring data seemed to be competing with him. The model conversion ratio was rising. It had already risen to 74%. It looked like there was no problem for it to reach the 90% standard. After all, the structure itself was quite simple. The problem lay in the interference rate. There was practically no reaction from start to end. Even if there was a slight fluctuation, it would be hard to call it stable. In this way, in a practical sense. Gao Meng felt a bit stifled. He tried to explain, the interference rate in the building is 5%. There will certainly be resistance. Also, are there many people in the venue who are not connected? Are they being diverted? What's the current number of connected models? 221 people. It's still rising. Many people are applying for seamless connections. But this will increase the load on the system. In theory, there is a risk of damaging the terminal. Do you agree? Without waiting for Ouyang Chen to give the order, Gao Meng clapped. Agree. Why wouldn't I agree? Looking at the interference rate, the possibility of damage is practically zero. Let go. Let go. As he spoke, he turned his head to look at Ouyang Chen. Right now, it looks like this is a piled-up model. Quantity is very important. Gao Meng pondered whether or not he should get 256 groups of support and join in the fun. If that kid Luonan could do it, then Gao Meng shouldn't have any problems either. As for Ouyang Chen, Gao Meng couldn't let him stay idle. You can still go up a level, right? The one in 1024 is yours. Gao Meng was just about to open his mouth to invite Ouyang Chen when Ouyang Chen issued an order. Turn on the warning. Module 4. Probe the direction of the gully area signal. Gao Meng was startled. His expression immediately turned serious. Is someone here to cause trouble? Ouyang Chen shook his head. At this time, a staff member asked him for instructions. Turn on Module 4. Request direction instructions. Internal Block A1. Circular Conference Room. Luonan had already received feedback from the Psychic Wave Network Maintenance Center on the rostrum of the Circular Conference Room. This included the serial number and code name his configuration obtained. Ring of Blood Intent. This name is barely acceptable. Luonan felt a bit unreasonable in his mind. This was because this name was different from the label on the user manual. It was more vivid, but it didn't touch on the essence. Right now, within the vast ocean of the mental world, thousands of water droplets and bubbles condensed into a circular form. A subtle transformation was happening. It became more textured and possessed more meaning from the perspective of structural science. Luonan's thoughts stirred slightly. This structure, which was full of textures and even the dazzling and blurred ocean of consciousness, suddenly lost all color. It transformed into a simple and even monotonous deep space of gloom. The turbid waters of the vast ocean retreated, and the dancing and floating curtains became the only elements in this space. Looking at it as a whole, the thousands of curtains were in a state of roughly regular parallelism. Layer after layer, from low to high or from far to near, divided the deep space of gloom into countless layers. But in terms of details, a considerable portion of the curtains were warped and intertwined with each other to form nodes. Luonan was no stranger to this sort of situation. It was probably due to the influence of formatting theory's absolute observation. Most of the time, the mental plane in Luonan's eyes was this sort of deep multi-layered structure of curtains. It was far more complex than the universal theory of 3 layers, 1 area and 1 domain. And it was precisely because of this that he had always lacked a sense of agreement with the universal theory. He felt no pressure when he rejected it. And now he used the mysterious eye symbol to reconstruct his understanding. Then he clairvoyantly observed the mental world, and the gorgeous and colorful elements fused into a furnace. Perhaps this was closer to the habits of ordinary ability users, but he could still switch at any time and return to his previous mode. Comparison was always the starting point for new discoveries. Right now, Luonan felt that the structure of the curtains he saw was more like a refinement and purification of the complete mental world. It was like simple mode, safe mode, and so on. Yes, it could be called developer mode. Under developer mode, Luonan was able to confirm that the curtains belonged to a certain key element of the mental world. Moreover, they were responsible for the construction of the frame. The logic world, gear, and the passageway leading to the cloud world were all powerful proofs. Luonan switched his observation mode, and the configuration of the ring of blood intent changed accordingly. It was a textured structural state in the dazzling sea of consciousness, but it was just a node in the deep and gloomy deep space. It was a simple interweaving of several curtains. The point of intersection was where the configuration was located. To be precise, there should be 3 curtains. One of them originated from the deep space. Another originated from the bottom. There was also a third strand that seemed to take form after the first 2 intersected. But soon it was pulled and merged with the existing curtains in the void, creating a third pole. It also formed a very typical three-dimensional position. Back then, Luonan had this feeling when he used the I symbol to reconstruct his cognition. It was as if a classical rectangular coordinate system extended from his body. The three directions led to different dimensions. Then it continued to expand, endlessly becoming more and more refined. That's right. Luonan himself was a node. Compared to himself, the node structure of the Ring of Blood Intent was far too simple. It was to the extent that he could already clearly distinguish the only details within. From what he could see, the structure of the curtains that originated from the deep space and the bottom began to permeate each other after they intersected. A few marvelous lines weaved back and forth on the nodes. They were just like the looms he saw in his history lessons. They weaved back and forth, warp and weft intersecting. Finally, simple or gorgeous cloth and satin were weaved. After the Ring of Blood Intent was formed, it connected with the curtains of the same nature in the void according to the patterns on it. Finally, the node was positioned. The Ring of Blood Intent belonged to the category of simple and unadorned cloth. Even if Luonan readjusted his perspective and gradually added various elements to restore it to a more superficial level, it wouldn't be that complicated. But Luonan himself was different. The weaving method of his structure was far too complicated. Millions upon millions of warp and weft lines, hundreds upon thousands of curtains, convolving and crisscrossing. They were capable of extreme changes to form a node such as himself. It was worth noting that not everyone could form a node. Even though Luonan was currently in the Shangding building, the area with the highest concentration of ability users in Xia City, there were only 3 to 5 such nodes. As for the ones that could be considered stable, there was only one. The weaving method had a very strong flavor of the logic realm. There was no need to mention it. It was President Ouyang. Bus. His wristband vibrated, startling Luonan awake from his thoughts. His train of thought had wandered too far. 10 minutes of homework time was up. He forced himself to turn his attention back to the Ring of Blood Intent. Though the weaving method of the Ring of Blood Intent was simple, it was one of the few nodes that could exist stably. This was especially true when over 1,000 participants continued to throw themselves into it. The monotonous technique was able to accumulate a considerable sense of existence. From this, Luonan was able to confirm that his lecture and the corresponding experiments were a great success. Chapter 567. The vanguard who held a skeptical attitude and acted as the spearhead was none other than Jianghu, the paid guest of the live show, Ari. However, his skepticism this time had the feeling that he was being forced into a corner. Things started when the homework time was nearing its end. Other than the ability users of Xia City still practicing in the public space on the psychic wave network called the Ring of Bloodlust, the audience of the live show had already finished what they could. Those who couldn't had no hope and returned to their activity level one after another. The top students exchanged their experiences on the forums, the octopus spammed in the live broadcast room, and the honest man watched Ghost Eye's fancy car racing. There was also another type of person, such as the proud and elated Miss Zhang Yingying. She relied on her absolute beauty and charm to gather a group of temporary fans. She would take revenge for injustice and revenge for enmity. In short, she wouldn't let Re, who was the leader, have an easy time. In terms of strength, Re, as a B-rank powerhouse, could basically crush Zhang Yingying. But in terms of eloquence, Zhang Yingying really went all out with Luonan's series of miraculous performances. She started with Re's initial spiteful actions, to the series of messages left on the forums, and then to the comments made by the show's guests. She pulled out each and every line and whipped Re into a sorry state. However, Re relied on her many years of popularity on the main site's forums and the conflict between headquarters and Xia City. She also gathered a group of people and bitterly held on. She managed to achieve chaos but not collapse. Once the situation entered a critical state, it would often enter a sweeping mode. Rational debate was impossible. Both sides' Xia blows and discrimination dogs were just a warm-up. MMP and TMD were normal ammunition. As for things like, "I have 300 pieces of your mother," and the like, they were flying all over the sky. So much so that the super administrators of the live broadcast room, forums, and other communication platforms raised their butcher knives and killed until heads rolled. But the super administrators couldn't control the two guests who were cursing each other through the screen. Especially Ari. She was already dizzy from Zhang Yingying's verbal abuse. Finally, after she received the phrase "honey-sucking mommy," she erupted brainlessly, "I'm afraid I won't feel good. I'm kneeling and licking without limit." I'm going to max beep beep beep. Under the gaze of 30,000 viewers in the live broadcast room, her actions were enough to destroy her image. Even among his allies, there were many who despised him for losing his composure. Seeing that Zhang Yingying could easily reap the lives of others with her high profile, someone just had to interfere. Let's bet. Impossible. Ari wouldn't waste his life. Even if it was Ghost Eye, he had to hold on. Ghost Eye wasn't angry. What, you don't have confidence? Of course Ari couldn't show weakness here. He wanted to get rid of the focus as soon as possible, so he racked his brains and refuted, that bloody will ring might be a good way to show off, but there's no proof of its real effect. Using a simple structure to reduce the difficulty is stable? Using a baffling verification method is called stable? How can you be sure it's stable? That's right, he was the one who set the standard of stability. Even the cage theory was created by him. This kind of imaginary theory and standard is all his personal definition. On the other hand, the universal theory and standard of 3 levels, 1 zone, 1 domain, is negated. Doesn't that mean that he's using his own standard to judge himself? I can do it if you want me. Yes, that's a reason. Ghost Eye, on the other hand, seemed to be accepting the advice. This kind of interaction was much more interesting than chatting with the vase host. He chuckled and said, "What you mean is that we can gamble, but there must be a common and fair evaluation standard. Bet your MP." Of course Ari wouldn't jump into the pit. He bit down, "I absolutely won't bet as long as it involves my teacher. This has nothing to do with winning or losing, and it has nothing to do with confidence. It's a matter of respect." Ghost Eye slapped his knee forcefully. "Well said, but you don't have that kind of respect for Luo Nan, right? That? It's done. Let's get this done in one go. We'll use a fairer method. Let's use photos. Let's change them all to Luo Nan's photos. Only the body parts are different. One beep beep, the other beep beep. That'll do." There was no doubt that this was a scene that would cause tens of thousands of people to burst out laughing. Everyone who was watching this impromptu mixed program spat out their food. Even the idle people in the circular conference room were hard-pressed to escape. A buzzing sound rang through the conference room, disturbing the attention of everyone else. Luo Nan had just been woken up on the podium at this time. He saw the situation in the conference room, especially the changes in the configuration of the group consciousness that had taken shape on the mental plane. His brows furrowed. He knew where the influencing factors were. Was that extremely thick-skinned old man of the outer seas playing cheap tricks out of boredom, or was he deliberately tormenting the audience this time? Luo Nan knocked on the podium in an attempt to call back everyone's attention. Indeed, the majority of people responded. However, on a deeper level, there was quite a bit of difference from the absolute concentration they had before. No matter how cheap Ghost Eye was, he was still an extraordinary. He naturally possessed the gimmick to attract attention. That person's personality was extremely shameless. If he really tormented the audience, it would have a direct detrimental effect on the construction and stability of the blood intent ring. Chapter 568. Realistically speaking, Luo Nan was the undisputed focal point of Zhang Ji's live broadcast and the viewing program. It was just that he had never thought of interacting with the audience of these two programs in the past hour or so. This was not within the scope of his mission tonight. Her Majesty Empress Wu would not give him a few more points for this. But now he had spoken, and he had spoken so naturally. This intense feeling of interaction immediately set off another wave of overflowing laughter from the surrounding audience. Soon, the participants in the circular conference room were swept in as well. It was unknown who started whistling, but the person even adopted a strange tone. "This wave of dog food has caught us off guard." The sudden tone aroused a wave of laughter in the conference room. Then the atmosphere could no longer be suppressed. Even those who had not watched the program had to make up for it at the last minute, let alone those who had been paying attention the entire time. Zhang Yingying was a beautiful, energetic girl. She was intelligent and generous. She had a wide circle of friends. She was quite popular in Xia City. Everyone knew that she could take a joke, so they didn't hold back. "Yingying, when did you make your move? What kind of logic is this? Why is Yingying the one taking the initiative? Boss Luo, we support you. Isn't the main point about when to start before the age of 16? Zhang Yingying sat in the center of the live broadcast area. Her eyes quickly blinked a few times. Her cheeks had heated up from the awkwardness of being pushed. She could not calm down for a while. She wanted to refute, but the dirty old man in the open seat chuckled and spoke from a distance. "Professor Luo, I'm your supporter. Tens of thousands of people can testify. We stand on the same side. I agree with everything you say. What's there to gamble about? Of course, if you're not satisfied with the gambling stakes, we can change our positions. In any case, it's just a joke. At this very moment, the spectators in every city all over the world had a similar evaluation in their minds. Scum with no bottom line. In any case, Ghost Eye Che-Yi was an extraordinary level power. He stood at the peak of human evolution. Don't ask him to put on airs every day, but you can't lower yourself to the mud without limit. Che-Yi, this old bastard. Over at the maintenance center, Gao Meng's face scrunched up as he watched. He was truly worried. Luo Nan, this pure and innocent youth, would be thrown into the pit by Ghost Eye in just a few rounds. Ouyang, we can't just watch as that guy wrecks the place. Ouyang Chen earnestly observed the changing data in the projected work area. He didn't even turn his head when he heard Luo Nan's words. Didn't he say that he agreed with Luo Nan's theory? Hey, his bullsh asterisk T. When it comes to the fundamental point of view, even a fart can hit a nail. Ah. While Gao Meng was distracted, Luo Nan opened his mouth once more from the podium. However, he didn't directly respond to Ghost Eye. Instead, he lowered his head to look at the voting system within the venue and read out a few numbers. 0154, 0198. 2446. The 14 people whose seat numbers have been read out have failed the Ring of Blood and Will. If he had the intention to post comments online, he could have sent half of it over. That way he wouldn't have taken so long. Luo Nan's expression was grave and solemn. This sort of situation shouldn't have occurred, especially since the nodes of the blood intent ring and the condensation ring of his clairvoyance had been connected and fused together. His course was complete in both theory and reality. It was time to reap the fruits of his labor. But because of Ghost Eye's unscrupulous prank, it caused a flaw to appear. Who could he find to reason with? Of course, a failure rate of 1% would not affect the construction of the group structure of the Ring of Blood and Will. It was just that he could have scored 100 points, but he was forcefully marked as a 99. This caused his obsessive-compulsive disorder to act up. He changed the digital pen stroke color to blood red and heavily circled these 14 numbers. Then he tossed the pen down and supported himself on the podium with his hand as he looked around the venue. Merely 2 seconds later, the roaring laughter and restlessness within the venue were erased one after another, until everything returned to nothingness. Densely packed seat numbers appeared in the work area, as well as the precise positioning of 14 red circles. This caused the participants to suddenly come to a realization. According to the explanation of the cage theory, Luo Nan was currently using an overwhelming method to simultaneously invade nearly 1,500 ability users who were present. Luo Nan had a complete understanding of their movements on the mental plane like the back of his hand. 5 seconds ago, the 1% who had been labeled had more or less some emotions. It wasn't as if no one wanted to straighten their necks and retort back. But now they were faced with the gazes cast over from front to back, especially the cold and heavy gaze of that person on the podium. The little bit of rebellious mentality they had was like a wasteland swept by a great fire. It was completely turned to ashes. At this moment, they wished they could bury their heads in their crotches or simply hide under their chairs. Perhaps they would be able to breathe a bit of flowing air that way. Luo Nan opened his mouth once more in this suddenly silent and oppressive atmosphere of the venue. These 14 people. Everyone believed that Luo Nan was going to continue to work hard and continue to berate them. But they never expected the latter half of his words to suddenly fly several hundred kilometers away. These 14 people were eliminated by your joke, Senior Ghost Eye. Does this result deviate from your conjecture? If the deviation really does exist, why can't you make a gamble? In the viewing program studio, Ghost Eye still had a smile on his face, but his figure leaned back. His eyes narrowed even more, and the rays of light through the slits cut across the live screen. He was a bit mindful of the word, conjecture, that Luo Nan spoke of. Ghost Eye really wanted to retort with a question. Did you guess it or did you really discover something? In the circular conference room, Luo Nan continued to speak. Let's bet on the one you guessed but haven't confirmed yet. Do you want to bet yes or no? Or do you want to add a time limit or something? Ghost Eye's eyelids twitched. At this moment he simply suspected that his cage had been violated. Though he didn't want to admit it, Luo Nan's stance had indeed affected his choice. His thoughts spun like lightning, and the corner of his lips perked up in an exaggerated manner. Gambling is just a game. It's purely for fun. So, if Professor Luo really wants to play, it's fine to add another level. The onlookers, both online and offline, were restless at this moment. This was a tit for tat. They were going to fight for real. Even if it was just gambling for fun, was the genius youth of Xia City going to fight against extraordinaries? Speaking of which, the scene a few days ago wasn't that bad. It was just that Her Majesty Empress Wu had interfered and interrupted it. However, the global audience had overestimated Ghost Eye's bottom line. All they saw was Ghost Eye twisting in his chair, assuming a more comfortable posture. Then he extended a finger. When it comes to making a bet, I always confirm the chips first. Only when the chips are equal can the stakes be placed on the table. Professor Luo, Brother Luo, though I really support your opinion and am your staunch supporter, are you prepared to make a bet with an extraordinary? The stakes must be at the extraordinary level. Frankly speaking, this is quite difficult for you. As he spoke, Ghost Eye gestured to the camera in the studio to give him a close-up. Look, because I'm an extraordinary, my selfie is also at the extraordinary level. You can't use your own selfie to exchange. Yeah, you can consider a martial emperor. Boos converged on the internet from all over the world. Ghost Eye looked on casually, waiting for the end of the story. However, Luo Nan nodded from the rostrum of the circular conference room. The extraordinary level. Things worn by me count. Chapter 569. Luo Nan did not continue to tangle with Ghost Eye. His attention shifted, switching his consciousness to a certain corner within the range of the soul cloak. The specific location was a certain subway station in the waterfront district of Xia City. His spiritual senses moved towards the material plane and locked onto an unknown storage box. The interior of the box was pitch black, but it didn't affect his mental senses in the slightest. Luo Nan could clearly see the thick and broad iron hoop that was placed randomly inside. He used his consciousness to engrave and store it. Then he used the psychic wave network to transcribe it into a readable image file. Now there was no problem with printing and displaying it. Luo Nan thought for a bit after he finished doing these things. He linked with the Wraith sign, drawing upon the Blood Soul Temple within his body. A streak of bloody light fell onto a certain restroom in the subway station. Soon a figure appeared over there. It was Emo Luan. Of course, the current Emo Luan III was a puppet of the Blood Soul Temple's third floor. This Grand Elder of the Blood Flame Order was still in the same appearance he had when he last appeared. Even his clothes had been replicated in a lifelike manner. However, if one were to touch it, one would feel the stickiness of blood. Emo Luan III came out of the bathroom and walked through the stream of people in the station like an ordinary person. He arrived at the nameless storage box, entered the password and took out the metal headband inside. The metal headband was the signature item that Jin Tong had worn when he was alive. It was also the so-called God-binding headband in the virtual brain system. It was the most critical component of the emergency combat equipment that he built. As the situation became more and more complicated, Luo Nan would most likely need to use this toy to protect himself. There was no meaning in shelving it. Most likely he would need to use it in front of others. Since that was the case, it was better to find a good opportunity for it to appear. Right now was a good window. Luo Nan told Emo Luan III to take this hot toy to Acumen College's gear building. Luo Nan told Emo Luan III to guard it properly. When he had the time, Luo Nan would start researching and using it. This chain of events was controlled by Luo Nan's consciousness. During this time, Luo Nan also split a portion of his attention to pay attention to the circular conference room. He paid attention to the gambling house he proposed. Ghost Eye would never be proper. Though he was shaken by Luo Nan's suggestive words, he soon rubbed his hands, squinted his eyes and giggled. Something to wear? Are you talking about the original taste of a martial emperor? If that's the case, then it's definitely not a problem. Luo Nan would absolutely not give any direct response to these kinds of remarks. But inside and outside the arena, the people who were paying attention to the development of the situation could not help but feel stifled. This. In the conference room, Zhang Yingying almost smashed Zhang Ji's camera down. Even when she was being teased, she didn't react so violently. Damn, I respect you for being a scum. This is getting more and more out of hand. How can we tolerate this? Why can't I tolerate it? Since there's Ms. Gong Mi, why can't there be Martial Emperor's original flavor? It's fair and square. You can't blame him for being an extraordinary. If he wasn't, he would have died a long time ago. The ability users of Xia City and those not from Xia City suddenly came to a sudden realization after a round of argument. Ghost Eye, this unrefined old man, was simply a jinx. Or perhaps he was a mottled old poodle who dissed the heavens, the earth, and the air. As long as he messed things up, he would be able to get what he wanted. The surrounding audience was deeply moved, while the people from the production team were the ones who felt the pain in their hearts. Backstage, the producer, the director, and the others looked at each other in dismay. They felt as if they had entered the mutual enrichment phase with the poodle. The sea they were in was only 500 kilometers away from the coastline of Xia City. Did they really think that Her Majesty Empress Wu wouldn't kill her way over? When the time came for the two extraordinaries to fight, wouldn't the men, women, old and young of the ship have to go fill the sea? The divine binding hoop had already been transferred over to the subway station at this time. Luonan was able to shift all of his attention back. He watched Ghost Eye's performance with cold eyes. However, he paid attention to one thing. Compared to Ghost Eye's unscrupulous attitude, Ghost Eye never stopped probing and evaluating in the special domain. From this perspective, Ghost Eye's attitude was extremely proper and cautious. Ghost Eye's tasteless words and actions were nothing more than a cover. Or perhaps it could be said that this was his personal favorite rhythm. Luonan was disinclined to pay attention to other people's hobbies. But right now, the normal state of the classroom had already been destroyed by Ghost Eye's personal rhythm. Luonan didn't want Ghost Eye to continue tormenting him. He retrieved a file and set it to display, making it appear in the work area. The results of the consciousness transcription were pretty good. At the very least, Luonan felt that it was quite clear. He rapped on the lectern, indicating for Ghost Eye to come over. I only have this one thing in my hands. Just say the word if you want to bet. Before Luonan's voice could completely fall, Ghost Eye, who was 500 kilometers away, seemed to have his back replaced with a spring. He instantly sprang up from the back of his chair, and his eyes and nostrils enlarged. Before these body movements and facial changes could stretch to their limits, Ghost Eye had already spoken decisively. I'll bet. Luonan grunted and cut off the image. Then let's talk about the requirements of the bet. Wait, I want to inspect the goods. Didn't you see it? Where's the real thing? Luonan looked over with great astonishment. It was like he was looking at a mental patient. You're talking about betting on photos. Ghost Eye's expression was brilliant in this moment. It was unprecedented. Some people in the venue couldn't help but burst into laughter. But this laughter inexplicably became quite abrupt. The people who had laughed were a bit stupefied. They subconsciously looked left and right, but all they saw were lifeless, blank, or stiff faces. In short, they were all expressions of abnormal experiences. When put together, it was enough to stand on equal footing with Ghost Eye. It was also at this moment that a strange change occurred in the atmosphere of the venue. Some people craned their necks to look at the stage, even though they only saw the image of assistant number 1 and the blood will hoop. Some people subconsciously exchanged opinions. What's in the photo? I didn't see it clearly. I probably didn't see it clearly either. Compared to the limited reaction time and number of people present, there were far too many methods on the internet to take screenshots. There was also the foundation and atmosphere of high-speed diffusion and amplification. So it was no surprise that the matter exploded on the internet. 5 seconds after Luonan switched off the photo, someone posted a relevant screenshot on the main website forum. Compared to the clear image, the thoughts of the speaker were clearly in chaos. Did I just see a murder scene? This thing? Holy sh*t. It's a headband. It's actually a headband. I'm so scared I'm looking for a fish on the ground. Several people followed the thread, but none of them dared to reveal their own conclusions. This continued until a hot-headed youngster tore apart this layer of meaningless concealment. This must be the iron hoop gene tongs. F***CKU. Compared to the difficult but basic discussions on the forum in the live broadcast room, which focused more on visual effects, reason had long since knelt at the feet of boiling emotions, shivering. F***CKF***CKF***CKF***CKF***CK. It was unknown who took the lead, but in the blink of an eye the live broadcast room was drowned in a waterfall of F***CK. A few noises like F***CK can't be said were interspersed in the middle. The impact of the explosion had already activated visual effects. But attentive people discovered that the number of viewers in the live broadcast room had suddenly dropped by nearly 3% in an instant. Moreover, it was still dropping. Someone sighed with emotion. The good days have come to an end. Overtime to death. Wrong. Overtime to hell. In any case, whether it was participants or spectators, both inside and outside the venue, they all sank into an unreal dream. They were instinctively unwilling to believe their own eyes. Perhaps they had entered a field of restless emotions. It was as if someone had swung a heavy hammer in the unseen world, causing tons of sputtering damage. There was also a dizzying effect. The scope of the effect spread throughout the entire world along with the live broadcast signal. The specific effects were impossible to assess in a short amount of time. Of course, some people maintained their rationality and sobriety from beginning to end. Yuan immediately contacted Luo Nan through the xianxia. The problem was that Luo Nan's train of thought diverged from hers by habit. He didn't even turn his head. He just gave her a "don't be impatient" gesture. Right now, most of Luo Nan's attention was on the mental plane. Whether it was the Great Sea or the deep space, this endless and deep region was much more restless than it was a few seconds ago. Some people had already forgotten to conceal themselves. Within the deep space of the mental plane, Luo Nan locked onto a limited number of highly complex and stable high-level nodes that were similar to him. The so-called high-level nodes were relative to the application configurations of the blood intent ring and the condensation ring. There was a high probability that these were extraordinary level life forms. President Ouyang was the closest to the Shangding building area. As for the area further away, Her Majesty Empress Wu was in the city district of Xia City. In addition, there were 3 others. 2 of them were swimming far away in the wilderness at the edge of Xia City. The remaining one was in the open sea region. Its position just so happened to coincide with the viewing program crew. It was undoubtedly the Ghost Eye Chei. At this very moment, President Ouyang and Her Majesty Empress Wu's nodes could be considered stable. The other 3 had become superactive. They were like vortexes that suddenly accelerated, driving the curtains that formed their nodes. They moved layer by layer and influenced Luo Nan's location on the material plane, projecting all sorts of fine fluctuations. The one who did this the most bluntly was Ghost Eye. This wasn't mental sensing, but it was a higher-level technique. From this, Luo Nan was able to confirm that this group of extraordinaries really did possess some sort of ability to cross large distances and distort the distribution of spacetime. However, the restrictions were greater. It wasn't as refreshing as direct mental sensing. In comparison, Luo Nan felt that his own sensing mode was more like that of a normal person with sensitive eyes and ears, 5 senses and 6 senses. Luo Nan compared the formatting theory's version of absolute observation that his grandfather had single-handedly created and the various clairvoyance modes he discovered on this foundation with the sensing methods of the apex experts of the inner world. It felt as if the virtual brain system and mainstream Earth technology had been placed on a display stand. Luo Nan didn't dare to say that there was a difference between heaven and earth, but it was quite apt to say that there was a difference of a few streets. This wasn't a difference in strength. It was a difference in levels. Needless to say, Luo Nan had a ready-made tool he could use right now. Luo Nan's consciousness was embedded in the configuration node that had already been successfully connected in deep space. Then he stared at Zhangji's live feed in front of him. He talked to the undying Ghost Eye. I just looked at the relevant standards. Normal state exploration time is 60 seconds. Combat state is 15 seconds. You can apply for verification. Then I'll invite you to verify right now. 500 kilometers shouldn't be a problem, right? Luo Nan's words had no head or tail. It was like guessing riddles, but those who should understand understood. Those who didn't understand were pondering. For example, Zhangji. Her brain spun at lightning speed. 60-15. That sounds familiar. Since there are specific values, just do a vague search. Find the society's internal database. Ghost Eye still wanted to act cheap. Pictures and such are too funny. If it's the real thing. Luo Nan ignored him. He turned to face the participants who were still at a loss and in a state of doubt. Right now, these people were all his students. He needed to let them obtain real benefits from his lessons. This was his promise to Her Majesty Empress Wu. Of course, this promise had long since been fulfilled. Right now, all he needed to do was finish what a patient with invisible obsessive-compulsive disorder needed. Therefore, gambling wasn't the goal. It was just a teaching tool. Luo Nan didn't care whether or not his students were willing to listen. He forcefully changed the course of his previous lecture. A successful configuration of the blood intent ring should maintain stability for a long time. Moreover, it shouldn't take up too much of your soul strength. The vast majority of you have done quite well. At the very least, you are able to maintain your shape after some torment. If no one has any objections, then let's do the last homework for today. We'll return to our main topic, the condensation ring. Frankly speaking, there were nearly 1,500 people present, but there weren't many who could listen to Luo Nan's lecture. Even the group of friends and relatives in the front row had grave expressions. Some even gave Luo Nan hand signals. Their minds had long since flown away from the blood intent ring and the condensation ring. Luo Nan spoke for a while and confirmed this problem. From his perspective, this was fine. The focal point of the circular conference room was still his body. The overall structure of the group consciousness hadn't changed. The only thing that changed was the driving force. The internal power to advance was broken by external pressure. It became directionless bewilderment, doubt and fear, as well as meaningless restlessness and excitement. All Luonan needed to do was to restrain them and give them a new driving force. Internal internalization was not possible, but external pressure was fine. Therefore he pressed his hand on the lectern and leaned forward slightly. His expression was solemn. Everyone, perhaps I need to remind you of something. I just made a bet with Senior Ghost Eye, and this bet will be completed by me and all of you. If I lose the bet, all I'll lose is a photo. But please believe me. What you'll lose will far exceed your imagination. On the other hand, if I win, you'll obtain a weight that is beyond the scope of your imagination. The conference room was deathly silent under Luonan's calm and clear gaze. Perhaps not everyone understood what Luonan was saying, but he succeeded in making everyone present experience his will and the feeling of oppression that corresponded with it. Of course, the instantaneous flash of the photo played the role of a catalyst. And at this time the results of the fuzzy keyword search came out. There were only a few answers in the Society's rigorous database. The first place was, validating the effectiveness of the gully region. Jianghu's gaze fell upon this entry, and she unexpectedly shivered. Then came the shuddering sensation of interweaving currents of heat and electricity. Ability users can leave their own unique imprint in the Abyss area, making it easier to locate and use. As long as the first time is successful, the difficulty of the subsequent attempts will be reduced accordingly. It seems that one can strengthen their connection with this area through training. After saying this, Jeff glanced around at all the investors and continued to pull data. In the inner world, the Abyss area is an extremely important offensive and defensive area for high-level ability users, especially those with mental strength. According to research, about 20% of B-class psychic abilities would be executed through the Abyssal Zone, and it was often their life-saving measure. Among the psychic superhumans, that proportion rose to 72%. Due to the problem of sample collection, the numbers were not particularly accurate, but it was basically confirmed that the highest echelons of the inner world had normalized the attack and defense of the Abyssal Zone. In fact, that includes us as well. The Deep Blue Walker's formatting domain involved the most advanced part of the domain, and they were also coordinated through it. However, our research and use are all copying and copying, which is still relatively shallow. In this aspect, they can't compare to the ICRC's Group AB, especially Tian Bang. It said that that guy has already reached the standard of a transcendent by relying on the accumulation of the blood flame order. TSK. Sure enough, it's meaningful and beneficial. Wang Ju condensed Jeff's long speech into 6 words. Then he turned to look at Herman. What do you think Sandalwood City will do in this situation? Herman's face was cold and he didn't speak. For the various large circles, everything was still a guess for the time being. Luonan didn't mention a single word about the Abyssal Zone during the lecture in the circular conference room. The topic of his lecture was still the condensation ring. Of course, compared to the beginning of the lecture over an hour ago, the overall atmosphere and mentality were like the difference between heaven and earth. We did some research before. I know that there are many people present who don't understand the structure of the condensation ring. Speaking of which, how many people are participating in tonight's lecture to learn the structure of the condensation ring? Luonan asked casually, but the people in the lecture hall didn't dare to treat him lightly. They looked at each other in dismay, and then the non-awakened on both sides of the hall raised their hands one after another. This number wasn't small. It accounted for at least 2/3 of the ability users present. Luonan laughed when he saw this. Actually, if you want to learn the condensation ring, the RT-8313 mission post on Headquarters website forum is the best way to do so. Her Majesty Empress Wu's demonstration is undoubtedly on the level of a textbook. At most, we can refer to the contents of last year's training course. That's how I came. At least 10,000 people felt stifled in their hearts at this moment. Fortunately, Luonan quickly changed the topic. Since there are so many people staring at the condensation ring, then I'll comply with public opinion. At the end of this lecture, I'll demonstrate the structure of the condensation ring a few more times to everyone. It's the same as giving a guide. Is this fine? Sparse responses rang out in the lecture hall. Most people were stupefied. Didn't he say that he was going to gamble? The focus was on the blood wool ring. Why did he suddenly jump back to the condensation ring? Luonan didn't explain too much. He swiped his hand casually, wiping clean the display diagram in the work area. All that was left was the enlarged version of the condensation ring from before. My demonstration this time will be a bit smaller than the condensation ring. I'll shrink it step by step and the process will go from slow to fast. Everyone please follow me if you can. I'll do my best to take care of everyone. I ask everyone to believe that the condensation ring is an art of simplifying the structure. You must also believe in your own abilities. It really isn't hard to just apply it. Luo Nan extended a finger as he spoke. He didn't make any other movements, but he had already realized the focus of the gazes of over 1,000 people. The group consciousness that had nearly been scattered by ghost eyes coalesced once more. Luo Nan's gaze cut across the live broadcast camera once more. 500 kilometers away, in the studio of the Reading Perspective program, ghost eyes stared intently at the screen of the circular conference room. He maintained an upright sitting posture at the same time. Only his 10 fingers were crossed in front of his chest. Under the pressure of the shadow of death, the program's director played with hand editing at an extraordinary level. He cut the two people on both sides of the gambling table into the same shot. It was as if they were looking at each other from a distance. The atmosphere was off the charts. Now is the first time. A bloody glow flickered in front of Luo Nan's body as he spoke. It was like the outline of a cinnabar brush, but it was also like a silk spider web. It slowly spread out in the void, snaking and shuttling back and forth. In the instant of drawing, Luo Nan's mind flashed with the scene of intersecting curtains on the mental plane. The scene of nodes being woven together flashed in Luo Nan's mind. In a trance, the void rippled and an image was embedded within. But this trance only lasted for an instant. In the eyes of over 1,000 participants and 30,000 spectators, the bloody glow in front of Luo Nan's body twisted and turned naturally. There were no obstructions at all. It was extremely nimble. It was like a lustrous flying insect. It fluttered and flowed in the void. The bloody threads of light were the flying insect's dancing trajectories. If one said that it was fast, then each trajectory was slowly drawn and clear. If one said that it was slow, then it was concise and transparent. It was not sloppy at all. Gradually, many people forgot that Luo Nan was carrying out the drawing of a configuration. They only treated it as a dazzling display of skill. In fact, Luo Nan's demonstration this time really wasn't playing for real. It was just another display of an enlarged version of the model. Although the drawing wasn't finished, it was still the size of a human head. Seeing with your eyes and seeing with your heart are different. Just like right now. The rules and laws in my heart are completely different from what appears on the outside. Luo Nan explained in a soft voice as the lines were drawn. His words were mysterious but they were sincere. Right now, he didn't even have a general idea of the condensation ring in his mind. He only had the curtains in the deep void of his mind. Before it was the blood will ring. Now it was the condensation ring. The latter's node structure was clearly more complex than the blood will ring. But when one carefully examined the origins of the curtains, they were all classified in the same way. One type originated from the bottom of the self. One type originated from the boundless heaven and earth. The last type originated from the intersection of heaven and earth. There was a vague picture of the three formats of self, society, and heaven and earth. The convergence of the three formats was the node. The exhibit, which was as large as a human head, didn't conform to the requirements of the configuration in terms of form. But in the unseen world, it still followed the true and not false law. Luo Nan could vaguely sense that this method of construction was the deeper mystery of the configuration. If he continued to extend it, it was very likely that he would use this opportunity to take a look at the condensation ring's mode of action on the microscopic level. He would use a special method to bypass the limits of his sensory precision and truly understand its essence. Unfortunately, he was still in class right now. He didn't have the energy to delve deeper. He could only do things more clearly and intuitively. Within the deep void of his mind, the node structures of the condensation ring and the blood will ring appeared at the same time. The two configuration nodes converged together according to his will. The two nodes were slightly distorted, but the direction of the origin of the curtains as well as the mode of construction always converged together. The principle didn't change. Under the suppression of the solid configuration principle, the two converging nodes maintained stability. They seemed to fuse together but their layers were distinct. With such a stable configuration principle and foundation, Luo Nan poured his strength layer by layer. It was like a river flowing into a canal. It divided and watered. It seeped into the soil and penetrated the roots. The thickness was all right. In fact, Luonan's strength was no more than a primer. As his first demonstration came to an end, the dancing firefly left behind a bright red trajectory that was deeply engraved in the minds of the majority of the participants. It drew out wisps of subtle psychic power, strands after strand, and converged into a stream. There seemed to be a gurgling sound in the air. It was very faint, like an illusion. It seemed to circulate in the depths of everyone's heart. Beep. Chapter 571. Ouch. Gao Ming subconsciously crushed the paper talisman in his hand into scrap paper. This was already the second time. The last time was when the picture of the iron hoop was presented. Jin Tong's life and death were of course very important, but as a cultivator and a veteran psychic ability user, he couldn't afford to be distracted when it came to high-level topics like the Abyss region. From Gao Ming's perspective, Luonan and Ghost Eye's gamble was clearly based on the criteria of entering the Abyss region and successfully staying there. However, there was an unavoidable prerequisite. Gao Ming wouldn't even blink if Luonan was able to enter the Abyss region. He subconsciously regarded Luonan as one of the most powerful psychic ability users. But from Luonan's words, it seemed that he was going to make a huge news. It was hard not to feel uneasy thinking too much. Gao Ming moved to Ouyang Chen's side and stared closely at every change in the system data. The AI's report made Gao Ming's scalp go numb, but he was a bit doubtful when he saw the value. Too small. Is it a miscalculation? The value is meaningless. Ouyang Chen's 10 fingers interlaced to cover his lips. His voice was a bit vague, but his expression was extremely focused. Gao Ming also knew this. Entering the Abyss region with soul strength was a very complicated process. Interference, engraving, observation. All sorts of methods were possible. It was very difficult to have a quantitative standard, and it was even more difficult to express it using secular measurement units. The psychic wave network of Xia City used the temporary standard of headquarters. The value was only for reference. It was more of a question of whether or not it existed. The key was that it was very difficult for a B-rank ability user to observe and grasp such a low value. Did it exist or not? Did Luonan enter by himself or did the gamble require it? He was really anxious to death. In the end he couldn't hold back and forcefully slapped Ouyang Chen's shoulder. Hey Ouyang. Give me a definite answer. Ouyang Chen calmly said, the answer of the psychic wave network is my answer. Gao Ming's eyebrows jumped twice. Luonan's first demonstration had already ended in the circular conference room. There was chatter on the internet. There were all sorts of things being said, but the conference room was abnormally silent. The bright trajectory remained in the eyes and hearts of most people. Luonan's voice broke the strange atmosphere. You should have some idea now. There weren't many people who responded, but Luonan didn't care. He casually explained a few of the difficulties that needed to be paid attention to when sketching his consciousness. The structure of the condensation ring wasn't too complicated, but it still had a few more checkpoints than the blood intent ring. Luonan didn't expect the several hundred amateurs present to be able to solve everything on their first try. Just as he said, all you have to do is get used to it, get used to this trajectory, get used to my guidance, get used to this pattern. If it had been an hour ago, such a straightforward and old-fashioned way of speaking would have been met with boos. But now, at least in the circular conference room, no one dared to say anything. The atmosphere was solemn and heavy. What Luonan did not tell the attendees was that the blood intent ring, which had been hidden behind the scenes, was still playing a more crucial role than the guided learning of the condensation ring structure. Its simple and basic module and cycle structure were the pathways through which the energy and information volatilized by the participants operated. At this time, people's consciousness space was scattered and overlapped. Under the guidance of the module structure, they were arranged neatly and returned to their respective positions. There was overlap and cooperation, but there was very little conflict and internal friction. Luonan's blood intent ring structure, consisting of 256 sets and 512 pieces, was the most complex in the entire venue. Right now he had the authority to lead. He was driving the group consciousness to start at a low gear. He wasn't in a hurry to change gears. Instead, he was accumulating power layer by layer. The attention of nearly 1,500 people present was becoming more and more stable. It was the equivalent of increasing the speed of rotation, maintaining a stable and gentle output. Of course, the condensation ring was the target of concentration. Its function was very important. The two ring-shaped nodes had already been completely docked. The potential development of the interaction between them had just begun. Focus your mind. Let's do it a second time. Luonan didn't give the first wave of exhibits too much time to survive. He wiped them away with a casual swipe of his hand, and then he started over again. This time it was a bit smaller than last time and the speed was a bit faster. However, not a single person raised the issue of being unable to keep up until the end of this demonstration. Luonan was still explaining after the second demonstration was completed. The content of his lecture was the same as the first time, but it was different. There was an emphasis here and there were hints and explanations for other segments. The attendees present listened attentively. No one felt that Luonan was long-winded. They just felt that Luonan's every word was able to hit the bottom of their hearts. This really is, Xianxia was an awakened after all. Her strength was guaranteed. She had no problems with the relevant understanding. Her thoughts were a bit scattered right now. She had some feelings. She was in the best position. She could see every detail of Luonan on the podium in a panoramic manner. But in the last few minutes, there was nothing else in her eyes but that blood-red trajectory. This feeling was extremely marvelous. Xianxia wanted to speak in the live broadcast room, but she inexplicably didn't dare to disturb the silence of the venue. She typed out a paragraph of text, something she rarely did. Friends who aren't present here might find it hard to understand the atmosphere of the venue. Whether your eyes are open or closed, there will always be blood-red strokes spinning in front of your eyes. All you need to do is focus your mind and you will be able to follow the strokes. It's just like when my parents held my hand and taught me how to write when I was young. I can barely write now, but the memories of that feeling are still there. It's like there really is someone holding my hand and guiding my attention. Even my thoughts. She paused for a moment and habitually used the word, astonished. It looks inconceivable at first glance, but I shudder at the thought of it. But she felt that it was inappropriate after these words appeared on the screen. She added another paragraph to compensate, but I still can't help but want to learn. This is because the blood-red trajectory floating in the air is truly exquisite, beautiful, and perfect. It's as if the condensation ring should be like this. Its configuration should be like this. Perhaps my will isn't to bend my knees to Luonan, but to salute to the truth. She didn't even have the time to look at the audience's response after she sent these few paragraphs of text. She saw Luonan raise his hand on the stage. Third time. Xianxia immediately tossed everything aside. She placed all her attention on the blood-red trajectory that was gradually taking shape. However, the participants, including her and Long 7, who were preoccupied with other things, were completely unaware that the model of the condensation ring had actually shrunk by a large margin. The current scale could already be constructed and used normally. In other words, it had leaped into the millimeter scale. The consciousness of the participants had already unwittingly broken through the barrier between the material and the mental. Everything they saw, felt, and knew blended together, becoming indistinguishable from one another. Only the viewers online discovered this point. They could no longer see the condensation ring. Many people reminded, shouted, and complained, but Xianxia did not respond at all. Only the live broadcast camera and the spy equipment continued to work with the help of artificial intelligence, transmitting every detail of the scene to the entire world. A faint gurgling sound rang out in the air once more. This time it was no longer an illusion. It was real. And it was at this moment that the live broadcast screen inexplicably turned hazy. A layer of rippling light faintly appeared on the screen, and thin smoke appeared in the room at some unknown time. The smoke weaved into a crisscross web and then spread out. Hiss. Gao Meng didn't know whether he should feel regret or rejoice. Due to the bet between Luonan and Ghost Eye, he was unable to participate in the experiments of the blood intent ring and the condensation ring due to his duty. But if he were to enter, how would he be able to see such a marvelous scene? The value displayed by the warning module hovered around the 1000th percentile, but the staff member reported other key data. The model conversion ratio is 59. 2%. The interference rate is 5. 2%. 5. 7%. It has broken through 6. And it's still rising. The speed at which the data rose exceeded the speed of speech. The interference rate of the SVIP-09 model had already broken through 7 before the staff member's voice had even faded away. And the momentum of the increase was extremely fierce. Gao Meng's gaze was locked onto the data, but the speed at which his brain spun was unable to keep up. He subconsciously said, "The model conversion ratio is too low." Ouyang Chen nodded slightly and immediately gave an order. Connect SVIP-06. Adjust according to the sniffing results. Confirm the combination. Automatic correction. SVIP-06 model was the dripping sword created by Her Majesty Empress Wu. Just 5 seconds after Ouyang Chen gave the order, the conversion ratio of the combination of the two models jumped to 94%. And it was still rising slightly. Looking at the interior of the circular conference room, the water vapor was like a thin mist, but it had a texture that mist did not possess. It undulated in the void like a delicate gauze tent swaying in the wind. It was in contact with everyone in the conference room, but it was also faintly independent, forming its own law. Is this the effect of the condensation ring? Gao Meng felt that it didn't seem like it. But after some thought he felt that it was very normal. It really is a fusion of two rings. Does this count as SVIP-10? If this counts, I'm afraid I won't be able to make it. Ouyang Chen pushed up his glasses. His expression was much more relaxed. He smiled and said, "Bloody will ring, this name is too casual. How about 100 connect ring?" Gao Meng choked. His logic was correct. You mean to say that this is a super support and it has the effect of a buff halo? I think it's more like an incubator, a greenhouse. Then let's call it Bloody will ring. At the same time, Gao Meng saw that the interference rate had already reached 10%. In other words, the interference power of the current integrated model was enough to support a decent battle. As for the abyssal region, the measured value could only be said to be stable. There were almost no fluctuations. If it existed, it could only be described as a bud. The question was, did it really exist? Up until now, Gao Meng himself could not sense it. As for what the extraordinaries thought,